You ever notice that, like, when you see like that cool old school TV look in video games and stuff? Like, it's awesome, but it almost feels like it makes your computer struggle to make things look older.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're totally right.
Yeah.
Actually, it's interesting. There's actually a ton of processing power that goes into making those simple aesthetics.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and we're talking about CRT filters. And you brought a really cool article about that today called "Why Do CRT Filters Take a Lot of Horsepower?"
Yeah, the title alone makes it sound like a workout or something.
Yeah, exactly right.
So let's dive into it. Like, what is it about these CRT filters that demand so much from our tech?
Well, I think to understand that we need to go back to like the source of the aesthetic,
Okay.
which is the CRT itself.
Oh, okay.
The cathode ray tube.
Like the big boxy TVs we all grew up with.
Exactly.
With the scan lines and the glow and that curved screen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the look that CRT filters are trying to replicate on our like sleek modern screens.
Okay.
And it's interesting because even if you haven't used a CRT yourself, you've definitely seen that aesthetic.
Oh, for sure.
You know, it's everywhere from old movies and TV shows to, indie games trying to evoke a sense of nostalgia.
Totally. Yeah, it's become its own visual language.
Exactly. Yeah.
But why is it so challenging to recreate that look? You would think with today's computers, faking an old TV would be easy.
Yeah, you would think so. But that's where things get really fascinating.
Okay.
The challenge really lies in the fundamental difference between how CRTs and modern displays work. One of the biggest factors is the sheer number of pixels.
Okay, I can see how that might be an issue. More pixels equals more work for the computer.
Exactly. Old CRTs had around 300,000 pixels.
Okay.
Which is decent for the time, but compare that to a modern 4K screen, which has over 8 million pixels.
Wow, that's a big difference.
It's a huge leap.
Yeah.
And so it's not even just coloring in more tiny squares. You have to remember those distinct visual elements of the CRT, the scan lines, the glow, even the curvature of the screen.
Right.
A CRT filter isn't just changing colors, it's layering all those effects on. And that involves a ton of calculations for each and every pixel. And it's all happening in real time.
So as we're watching our retro game or video, our computer's doing millions of tiny math problems every second just to create the illusion of an old TV.
Exactly. It's essentially solving this massive puzzle that you can't see that's constantly updating as the image changes.
Oh, wow. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing pixels and calculations aren't the whole story, are they?
You're right. Another major hurdle is color.
Okay.
CRTs have their own unique way of displaying color that modern screens don't naturally replicate.
Okay.
They use something called a shadow mask.
Okay.
And so imagine a really fine mesh placed over the screen.
Okay.
This mesh would filter the electron beams that produce the image, and it created the individual red, green, and blue dots that made up the pixels.
Oh, so it's like a physical filter built into the screen itself.
Exactly. And it's this shadow mask that contributes to the unique color characteristics of a CRT.
Okay.
So to truly capture that retro look, a CRT filter has to mimic this very intricate color mixing process digitally.
Gotcha.
And that is where the graphics card, the part of your computer that handles images, really starts to sweat.
So it's like putting digital makeup on the screen, but instead of foundation and blush, it's complex algorithms and shadow mask simulations.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
It's all about mimicking the quirks and imperfections of the original technology.
That's really interesting.
And remember, this is all happening in real time as you're watching or playing.
Right. Yeah, no time to stop and think, just constant calculations on the fly.
Exactly.
So given all this computational heavy lifting, is there a point where the CRT filter actually slows things down? I mean, those old CRTs were pretty simple, right?
You've hit on a really fascinating and ironic point. Despite all this processing power, modern screens can actually lag behind in terms of responsiveness compared to the CRTs that they're imitating.
Wait, seriously, you're telling me those clunky old TVs were actually faster?
In terms of input lag, absolutely.
Wow.
CRTs had almost zero lag because they were directly displaying the signal.
Gotcha.
Modern screens, even with all their power, have to do so much extra work to mimic the CRT aesthetic that it can actually introduce a slight delay.
That's wild.
Yeah.
It's like we've come full circle. We have these incredible machines, and yet we're struggling to perfectly recreate the simplicity of an old TV.
It's a classic trade-off, visual fidelity versus performance.
Yeah.
We see this all the time in technology.
Okay.
But there are things that we can do to make things a little bit easier on our computers.
Okay.
And that's something we can talk about after a quick break.
So we've got this situation where like our computers are working super hard to make things look retro, and it can actually slow things down.
Right. Yeah. Kind of a funny situation.
So is there anything we can do to like help out our poor computers?
Yeah, definitely. There are a few things that you can do to kind of find a good balance,
Right.
between that authentic look and having things run smoothly.
Okay, cool.
One that our article mentioned is lowering the resolution.
Oh, okay.
So basically, lowering the resolution means fewer pixels
Okay.
for the computer to process, which means less work.
Right.
So it's kind of a trade-off, right?
Yeah.
You're sacrificing some of the crispness of the image.
Right. So it's like, do I want it to be like super clear, or do I want it to like run smoothly?
Exactly. It's about figuring out, what's most important to you and what works best for your setup.
Okay.
Another approach is to like simplify the effects themselves.
Oh, okay.
Instead of trying to perfectly replicate every single like tiny little detail of the CRT,
Right.
maybe you can just pick and choose.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Which elements are like the most important for evoking that retro feel?
Right. So maybe like I don't need the curved screen. Scaling.
Exactly. Maybe just the scan lines and the glow are enough.
Okay.
Without like pushing your graphics card to the limit.
Right. So speaking of graphics cards, this is where like the serious retro enthusiasts will want to pay attention.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Absolutely. If you're really, really dedicated to that pixel perfect retro look,
Yeah.
and you're willing to invest,
Right.
then a powerful graphics card can make a huge difference.
Okay.
One that's specifically designed to handle those complex visuals.
So for people who want like the best of both worlds, they want the look and they want it to run well,
Exactly.
then it might cost a little extra.
Yeah, you might need some specialized hardware,
Okay.
which, that's pretty common in technology.
Yeah, for sure.
But this whole discussion about, CRT filters and how much power they take actually points to a much broader trend.
Ooh. I like where this is going. What do you mean?
Well, it kind of highlights this like constant push and pull that we see
Okay.
between wanting really realistic and complex visuals, but also dealing with the limitations of the hardware that we have.
Right. It's like we want games to look amazing and movies to look so real, but like all that detail comes at a cost.
It totally does.
Right.
Yeah, and it's like we're constantly trying to outdo ourselves.
Yeah.
And push the limits of what's visually possible.
Yeah.
Even if it means like really making our computers work.
Right. Yeah. Putting them through the ringer.
Exactly.
It's kind of funny, actually.
It is.
And this challenge isn't just limited to retro aesthetics, is it?
No, not at all.
Like, what else is out there?
Well, think about all the advanced graphics that you see in modern games.
Okay.
Like realistic lighting, complex physics, where things are moving around and interacting with each other.
Yeah.
And then just like the detail of the textures, all of that requires a lot of processing power.
It makes you wonder what other visual effects that we see all the time are actually like secretly taxing our devices without us even realizing it.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And it's not even just about the raw power of the computer.
Okay.
It's also about how that power is actually being used.
Oh, interesting. What does that mean?
Well, it's called optimization.
Okay.
So it's not just about having a powerful computer. It's about how efficiently the software uses that power.
Okay, so like the people who actually make the software, they have to think about this too.
Totally. Yeah, developers are always working on new ways to create really amazing visuals, but also minimize the performance impact.
Oh, wow. So it's like this balance between art and like technical wizardry.
Exactly. It's like a collaboration
Yeah.
between the artists, the programmers, and the engineers,
Wow.
all working together to create these experiences without sacrificing performance.
This has been like really eye-opening, actually. I never really thought about how much goes on behind the scenes
Right.
to like create what we see every day on our screen.
Yeah. It's easy to take it for granted,
Yeah.
but there's a lot going on.
Yeah, it's a whole world behind those pixels.
It really is.
I feel like I have a new appreciation for like both the art and the technology that goes into like making the stuff that we enjoy.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, and speaking of appreciation, like we've been talking about how hard it is to recreate this CRT look, but like maybe we
Yeah.
should just like take a minute to appreciate the original.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
CRTs might seem kind of clunky and outdated now,
Yeah.
but they were like groundbreaking in their time.
Totally.
They were the foundation of TVs and computer displays for decades,
Yeah.
and they have this really undeniable charm
Totally. Yeah.
that people are still fascinated by.
It's like this reminder that even though technology keeps changing, there's something special about those older, simpler devices.
Yeah, they have a real nostalgic appeal
Totally.
that connects us to the past.
Yeah, so as we like marvel at the amazing graphics of the future, we should remember the CRT
Absolutely.
and how it changed everything.
For sure. Yeah.
I agree. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into CRT filters.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
You know, it's funny, right? Like we spent all this time talking about how to make our computers look like old TVs.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about all the other stuff that might be going on that we don't even realize.
Oh, absolutely. You know, like even those simple visual effects,
Yeah.
you know, they can actually have like a ton of complexity behind them.
Oh, totally. Like what are some other things that come to mind?
Well, think about those like super realistic water simulations that you see in games.
Oh, yeah.
Or that motion blur
Yeah.
that makes like action scenes look really dynamic. All that stuff
Yeah.
involves like tons of calculations and, you know, really clever programming
Yeah.
just to get that look.
Wow. So it's always this balance
Yeah.
between making things look awesome
Right.
and making sure it doesn't like totally kill your computer.
Exactly. It's all about making sure that people can actually enjoy the experience
That makes sense.
without, you know, it being like super laggy and choppy.
Right.
And, you know, as technology gets better, that whole process is just going to get more and more complicated.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is, but it's also really cool.
I feel like I've learned so much.
Yeah.
I'll never look at those retro games the same way again.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, is there anything else about these CRT filters that you think is like super important for people to remember?
You know, I think the biggest thing is that even simple stuff can be really complex.
Yeah.
Like what looks like a basic visual effect on the screen
Right.
actually involves all this crazy technology and creativity
Yeah.
and even psychology.
Yeah.
You know, understanding how we actually see things.
Oh, wow.
So it's like a reminder that there's always more to learn and more to explore
That's a great point. I like that.
and more to appreciate about the world around us.
Totally. Like even in the stuff we see every day.
Exactly.
Well said, What? This has been an awesome deep dive.
It has been, yeah.
I think that's all the time we have for today.
Okay, cool.
Thanks for joining us and learning about CRT filters.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and remember, there's always another deep dive out there waiting to be discovered.